Hi, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Auto Heterophiles. Today, I am joined by Sasha, who is autogynephilic, and just they wanted to come on my channel to share their story, and I'm glad to have them here. Uh, yeah, thanks for coming on the channel, Sasha.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
So, I'm curious how did you find out that you were autogynephilic?
This was like May of last year. So I guess we're approaching like 8 months ago. I can't do math, but around there. And I read a book that was assigned for one class that I took at my school. It was like an ethics class, and we talked about sexuality and war and racism, which are the hot topics. And we read a book by Preston Sprinkle called Embodied. And he described a lot of the different like trans experiences. And then he just described like one of the type of trans experiences as an autogynephilic like etiology. And I resonated like the most with that one. And I remember being really mad when I first read it because I was like, Preston Sprinkle is like trying to make me trans or like make me like transgender when I'm not and I don't want to be, which is pretty funny. So I kind of had to wrestle with that and rather than push back on him, be like, maybe I actually do fit the categories that he's talking about. Because I also fit some of the other ones. Like he had different types of trans ideologies, and we don't all fit like a specific box. So I felt like a lot of the trans experiences that he kind of described, like I felt like I fit a lot of them. Um, and then so that's kind of how I found out about it, and I didn't really know that like that ideology, like the AGP etiology, was like really that controversial until I like researched into it more. So I'm glad I didn't, in retrospect. So that's kind of how I figured out about it, and then I talked to one professor who I felt like opening up to. He's been like really helpful for me and journeying with me in it. And then he was kind of like, well, you need to think about why you had that negative reaction. So yeah.
Right, because if it bothers you, it's tapping into something that is probably true or that you identify with.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've noticed that often the type of people that hate on the autogynephilic concept or the theory associated with it, they often fit within the category, and it's pretty clear why it bothers them.
Yeah. And I think that for me, it was easier for me because Preston Sprinkle, the way he described it was like not condemning at all. Because I don't think it should be condemning. Like most of I guess coming from like the turfs, they'll be like, oh, you're like a weird, like, fetishist who is using like women and objectifying women or something like for your own fetish, which is just not true. Like that's not, I mean, it's just not true, I don't think. And Preston Sprinkle really described it like in a good way. And he also described it as like one of the types of different trans experiences. So I feel like you don't have to necessarily identify like as AGP or trans like differently. I feel like it can be a type of like trans experience. I mean, I like the term trans experience. I don't know. That's my favorite term. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I think it was you that told me about Preston Sprinkle's book, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then you went on this podcast, and then I was the anonymous AGP trans Christian that you talked about. And then I got to meet Preston at a conference, and he gave me a big hug and everything. So that was great.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy. I mean, I'm not into I've never really been involved in the Christian scene, but he definitely seems like one of the nice open-minded ones.
Yes.
Um When did at the time of recording this, you're 21, right?
Yep, I'm pretty young.
And when in your life did you start having feelings of like wanting to be a girl or discomfort with being male? Like when did you first start having feelings that you can now recognize as autogynephilic?
I would say 18 was kind of my turning point. I feel like that's kind of the peak of like after, I mean, you hit puberty in like your teens, but I feel like 18 was kind of when I was fully developed, and that's kind of was my turning point. But looking back, after knowing that I had like trans experience, I was able to look at my childhood and be like, oh, that's where that came from, or look at the like AGP trans category and be like, oh, I had a pretty stereotypical childhood. Like some of the signs, what would you say? Like very male, stereotypical interests, childhood, but um, I had like also stereotypical female interests that were kind of like hidden that I didn't really tell many people. I could share some of those and go into that, or if you had questions.
Yeah, like could you go into some of the specifics of the sort of things that you experienced as a kid?
Which one would you like? The masculine, like stereotypical, or
Um, I was thinking the whatever ones you think would be
okay, yeah, I'll
caused
just
by
go.
AGP, but like honestly, whatever you want to talk about.
Okay, good. I'll just go through like some of the notes I had. I would say like from a very young age, like I was doing tucking, but like I didn't even know what it was. Like nobody told me what it was. So somehow I figured out how to like do that, and that gave me like what I can now recognize as gender euphoria, rather than like dysphoria. Like I could see that, like looking at myself, without that, like I'll just say like without the bulge that I had was like that's gender euphoric. So I felt like, looking at myself in my childhood, like that was pretty telling. Pretty interesting. And then I remember uh like the TV shows that I would watch like as a teenager and a kid. Like I had pretty masculine like stereotypical shows that I watched, but also like I was watching as a teenager the show Girl Meets World, and I watched literally all of them, and I loved like that show. Um, and for some reason, like I never really thought that that was weird. Like I knew that I didn't really want to tell other people that I liked that type of thing, because they might think like that's weird. But now, like that show was invented for teenage girls, and I was like, oh, didn't really think about that before. And then I guess the other thing was like, I remember a specific show or a movie that was like Scooby Doo. This is so funny. It was like a Scooby Doo movie, and then Fred like and Daphne like switch bodies, and then he like became Daphne or switched bodies with her in one of the movies. And like I still remember that now, watching it as a kid, which I feel like is pretty telling of like, I don't know, like my experience as a kid. But I had a masculine like stereotypical childhood. Like you wouldn't look at me and be like, oh, this person might seem like really feminine. I mean, I love hockey, like very masculine typical sport, like very rough, fast. I mean, I played at elite levels as a kid, and like I quit because of injuries, but I played at like elite levels and loved it, and I was one of the more physical players as well. So
Did when you had when you tucked and you felt gender euphoria, like what sort of adjectives would you use to describe how it felt?
it wasn't really sexual like or anything like exciting like that. It was more just uh like I would just do it and then just like stare at myself for a while and just be like, oh, this is what it would be like if I were a girl, um, like in my body. Like I don't know, I haven't really uh, dug into it too much, but I just remember doing that. Because this is before, I guess I would say, like, before I kind of developed later on in puberty. So it wasn't necessarily like inherently sexual. It was more just, I guess, like I would later call that like an AGP trans experience, or I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, I mean, I just consider it part of the broad. Like when I think of AGP, I don't think of it as strictly eroticism. That's just its most obvious sign. Um, but I think I even include like all the emotions and sentiments, like just the longing to be female or
Oh yeah,
any of that stuff. I think
100%.
it's
Yeah,
yeah,
I feel like it's too uh people like make it out to be so much more like sexual and weird than it is, especially like maybe turfs. So
yeah. Well, they're trying to accomplish a particular political thing, and a lot of them are women and high in neuroticism. And while I like can agree with some particular policy positions, maybe I think a lot of them are just they're haters, and they they're kind of politicizing something that isn't necessarily political. It's just like a lot of people, like it's not political that some people are AGP or AAP. It's just like it
exactly.
happens.
Exactly. I was hoping to get into that later, especially with like the Christian stuff too.
Yeah. So when you started going through puberty, did it like the AGP feelings ramp up, or like what, like how did it feel? What happened?
I would say I didn't notice it because I was kind of unaware, like that I had that. Because like we're talking about the mainstream trans stuff didn't necessarily come in until I was a bit older anyway. So, I mean, I'm 21. Like that stuff didn't get popular until I was like maybe 16 or 17. So I didn't even hear about any type of transgender anything as a kid. So I would say, where am I going with this? Sorry, what was the question you asked again?
Oh, just
I
how
remember.
around how puberty, how did it change or show up?
Oh yeah, I was just saying like I didn't really recognize that I had any type of like AGP because of how when the trans thing came in my like when I was like 16, 17, the way that they narrate it is that you feel like you're a girl trapped in a man's body, and that you like are a woman, like your essence is feminine, like you are a woman. And I always felt like just a man who desired to be a woman, which is different. So I didn't really relate to any of that stuff. So when it like when it changed, I would say most of my friends, like in high school, like I had male friends, but I felt closest to or most comfortable with, and more like girls, like in high school and stuff. So I would say like how I went into puberty was um, like mostly kind of my social circle seemed like women, uh, in high school. And then I remember like telling one of my friends like it would be easier for me socially if I was a woman. Like I wish that I was just born a girl. It would be easier for me like to navigate life. I don't know. And then she was like, "Oh well, be careful who you tell that because we were in a pretty conservative environment and you can't really talk about that at all." Uh, but then I would say like then when I got to 18, it became more pronounced. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? You can ask
Yeah.
more.
What? So when you got to 18, like, do you know why that happened at 18? Like, did you just move out of your parents' house, or like what do
Uh,
you think caused
I
that?
don't. I don't know. I think it was like moving out, different environment. I would say like when I was 18. So this is a while ago. Um, I just enjoyed like presenting myself as female, like online, in some spaces where I could do that. Like, um, and then I also enjoyed like I guess 18 was when I kind of moved out and got like my first kind of like real relationship. So I got in a relationship with a girl, like with a woman, when I was 18. We were the same age, and then I think we had a relationship for almost a year. So like some of the stuff kind of emerged during that and before that, I would say. So we could go into that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, share whatever you feel is related to this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, well, like, I don't know if this was Preston Sprinkle or you, but people who are like AGP can just have like, also, that doesn't mean you aren't attracted to women or can't have relationships with women, which I feel like most people don't really, they have a conception that like trans people don't do that. But you can. So I did for like a year. And I remember like telling her like, oh, we would be at like a TJ Maxx or something or a store, and I'd be like, wow, those like women's jeans like look so good. I would love to wear those. And so that was like the cross-dressing stuff, and uh, it just didn't, like, we didn't really take note of that at all. It was kind of just a thing, and I kind of presented myself more as like, I like, softer things. I like staying inside. I don't know. It's just so stereotypes, but um, I would say when we listened to like Taylor Swift, like the song Love Story, she mentioned, she was like, I think that you are actually the Juliet. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, I liked that, but looking back now, I see where that was kind of coming from. I don't know if it was something that she noticed, like in the way that our relationship functioned. Like, I don't know. So
Yeah, maybe she noticed that you got really excited by Taylor Swift songs or something.
yeah, I think so.
Um, how how has being Christian affected sort of how you navigate your gender feelings?
Yeah. You think about it. I would say it's pretty hard because I feel like I love the Bible. Like I love the languages, especially. Like I know Hebrew, ancient Hebrew.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I learned Middle Egyptian hieroglyphics. Love that, and I'm learning Akkadian right now. So I love like the deep, deep ancient like history, ancient Near Eastern history study. And I feel kind of like disqualified a little bit from that for some reason. I think it's more of a lie that like I tell myself, but because of like the kind of conservative environment I grew up in, I feel like if more people found out, that it would be like, oh, I'm not able to like, I guess I kind of saw like my gender feelings as a separate world from the Bible stuff when it doesn't really have to be. So I'm kind of navigating that together right now. And I feel like what most of the Christians who are like super conservative, I mean, Preston Sprinkle's like a great one, but people that aren't as much like him are reacting against like the woke kind of trans group. And I feel like those Christians haven't even scratched the surface of like this entire uh, thing, like this whole trans thing. I feel like they're at the very surface of it, and they're reacting against like the woke people who are like, trans women are women, and like we should go into the bathrooms and like sports. And I feel like there's a lot of people like us who are not for that as much, and uh, maybe a lot of the Christians are reacting to like a politicized version rather than people's actual experiences. And I think Preston does like a great job of listening to people's experiences. And I feel like more people should think like him and listen to people like us rather than politicize.
Yeah, I understand the frustration with that. But it's also, I feel like Christianity, it's a very ancient tradition, right? And sort of the heterosexual marriage with reproduction is sort of how cultures like reproduce themselves.
Yeah,
And so I think any long-standing traditional culture like that is going to be what would now be considered heteronormative, and sort of um, prioritize that sort of standard heterosexuality over other sexual expressions because of its ability to reproduce the culture and the people. Um, I guess is I often think I'm thinking of this in like an evolutionary sense, but
yeah, me
it
too.
it, it definitely makes sense to me that that would be the norm among Christians for them to be skeptical of um, the new trends that are sort of pulling people away from the traditional heterosexual marriage and reproduction
Yeah,
track.
yeah, and I feel like most of those Christians though they're like, oh well, we're reacting against culture and we're not going to go with culture, but I feel like they're just playing into their own culture, you know. So
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because if like if the church is based around this higher transcendent value, right, this higher spiritual realm, then the trends in like worldly society, like they kind of have to be somewhat resistant to just going along with the trends because at some point, um, what what do they even hold as sacred anymore that's different from
yeah,
the rest of the world?
yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think Christianity is like, you know, it's as you said, it's very ancient and it's pretty broad, and I think like that you can have experiences like trans experiences and still like follow Jesus and be a Christian. It doesn't necessarily mean that you, I don't know, buy into all the like woke stuff. Like, you know, when you say that, people might assume things about you, but I think that these are just people's experiences. I mean, they're real people who have real experiences that are not inherently political, like you said.
Yeah, I think with time, a lot of the different Christian congregations will figure out how to integrate trans people and what their sort of policy is on it.
Yes, yeah, and hopefully that development is good. And I think also Christians like we have a we have a sense of the body and that like God made our bodies and like matter good. Um, so I'm still struggling and wrestling through like what my kind of theology of the body is, but you know I can't go into that too much. But I know it's there, and I believe that God didn't like make a mistake creating me. So
Right. It like you were supposed to be the way you are, and this may present a difficulty, but I guess it's your like proverbial cross to bear.
um, I guess so. I would just say I don't really know necessarily how to navigate it right now. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to wrestle through it and like pray as much as I can about it and be at peace. I mean, I think religion is usually rejected by uh, like trans people or AGPs, but I feel like prayer can be a very powerful thing, you know, for connecting like to yourself and just giving up like your feelings of longing because like it with AGP, like you have this longing, right, that you've talked about, to be a woman that can never really be fulfilled. And uh, I found personal like health, not health benefits. Like I've felt security and comfort by just kind of praying that and saying that out loud to God. Um, so yeah,
Saying that you want to be a woman or that you can't
yeah, like
fully do
both.
it.
Like both. Yeah, just like saying your, desire and naming that to God and like just leaving it there. I can think has like therapeutic benefits for people.
How are you when you think about the path forward, what are your considerations about how you plan on dealing with the autogynephilic feelings?
I don't really know. I think the biggest thing for me, kind of coming out and telling some of my friends and other people and wrestling with myself was looking at the future and being like, I just can't play the like heteronormative role anymore, like with relationships and like, societally. I feel like I just can't do it. So I kind of just hit a brick wall where I had to accept this. And I would say going forward, like, I mean, I cross dress, pretty frequently. Obviously, at work and like at home or out and about, like you have different clothes that people wear anyway. Like, I mean, you might wear like a suit and tie to work or to a conference or to something, and then you wear pajamas at home. And I feel like the same for me is that I wear more, either uh, like androgynous things at school or work, or masculine. And then, other places, if I feel like it, I can wear more feminine things. So I feel like that's kind of where I'm going for the future. Um, and also like I love makeup and like experimenting with makeup. Like it's just fun. Like I don't really see anything inherently wrong with that. I mean, it's just fun. And uh, I don't going forward, like you asked for the future, knowing the AGP like etiology is really, really helpful. Um, so I'm so thankful for what you've done and what Preston's done, because uh, I feel like a lot of people get sucked into the hole of like, I am a woman, and they want to fully transition. And I mean, some people transition, but for me, I feel like that doesn't work for my social circumstances right now. Um, and I'm never going to necessarily be like, oh, I am a woman in a man's body, because I know that what the etiology likely is. And I don't think that etiology is something to be like ashamed about. Because I mean, I don't think heterosexuality or homosexuality is something to be ashamed about either. So
Yeah, if you were to transition, do you think you would like how do you think you would describe yourself?
I don't think I will. What do you mean by transition?
Oh, um in the sense of I don't, like say you went on hormones and then people notice that there's something off about you in terms of like why is your skin so pale and smooth
Yeah,
like that, like and people ask like what's up with you, like how would you explain that to them?
I would probably, it depends on who I'm talking to, because I like to use words that appeal to, I like to say the exact same thing to different people using different words that they like. Um, so maybe I would say like that I have gender dysphoria and that I'm using hormones to mitigate that. Or I might say just a feminine male, or I might say I'm a gender nonconforming male, or I might say like I identify with my birth sex, but I simply have like gender dysphoria. Uh, I don't know. Like it depends on who I'm talking to, right? Um,
Yeah, well I mean I think those all gave me some sort of idea, because
yeah,
even if you don't, and there's also the chance that um the sort of the cross gender identity development can be progressive, and so even if right now you're comfortable calling yourself male, at some point that may not be the case.
yeah. I'm scared
um
of that. I don't want that to happen as of now, but I feel like I since I believe that it's AGP. Like I kind of understand more where it's coming from. Where I feel like that kind of does stop my train tracks. Would you say so or no?
yeah, I mean it probably depends on how much of a priority you put on being realistic and accurate. I think if you are like sort of like I am like prioritizing accuracy and things like that,
Oh, I'm
that they're kind
100% like that.
yeah, then there probably is sort of a limit to, at least in terms of like how you'll see yourself in terms of the words you would use to describe your gender identity.
Yeah, I'm totally like that. I mean, I like to think in terms of concrete reality, truth. Um, yeah.
How often do you cross dress currently?
It depends on like what you mean by cross dress, because like a lot of like the women's clothes like just don't look like women's clothes that I wear. Because for me, it kind of started with like the pants, and like I wear a lot of like women's pants and stuff. So it's not as noticeable. But how often do I do it? Uh, I don't know. Like maybe every other day. Uh, maybe a couple times a week. Yeah.
How often do you do makeup?
Uh, if I'm going out with friends in like the afternoon or night, I can do more makeup, which might be 1 or 2 times a week, a couple times a week. But if I'm at school, I can't really do makeup as much. But sometimes I'll wear like a tiny little bit of mascara or a little bit of eyeliner. That's not super noticeable, but it's kind of noticeable. And maybe I'll wear a little bit of blush, like that's also not super noticeable. It's just fun. Like uh, I don't know. I just like doing it. It's just really fun. Yeah.
Do you have you considered uh gender transition? And if so, like what are your like considerations on that front? Either like
Uh,
pro or con.
it depends on what you mean. I'm never probably going to transition like socially ever to present as female. I just don't see that fitting for my social circumstances. I really like what you said. I don't remember where this was, but you said the question isn't "Am I trans?" but the question is what aspects of transition do I want, and are they worth the payoffs and risks? Um, so I feel like I don't necessarily think of things in terms of like I need to transition to female everything, but I might want some aspects of transition because I just don't think like for my career, for my family life, for uh, my circumstance that is even feasible. And I like to think in terms of reality and like what can I do in my actual reality. So if I were in an alternate universe, then I guess so.
Is when you say like it's your social situation that sort of holds you back somewhat, do you mean specifically being Christian?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I'm looking at a career in, uh, Bible scholarship, and I've already kind of put myself on the map a little bit. Uh, and I mean, I'm not super well known, but I am. I have, some people like who would recognize me, and if I like transition from male to female, like that's a big bomb that I don't want to set off at all. I'd rather be more subtle and private about it. But I don't want to hide it. I mean, I'm comfortable like coming on here and talking about my experience and sharing with my friends, but I don't think like your sexuality and gender issues has to be like the forefront of who you are. So I don't necessarily feel a need to like, I don't know. Does that make sense? Or did I answer
Yeah.
the question?
Yeah. Yeah, you're
Okay.
doing fine. Um yeah, no, I hear you on um not needing sexuality and gender to be at the forefront of like your public facing identity.
Exactly.
Because like even though like I am publicly autogynephilic, I'm it's not like I just intrinsically wanted to do that. It's to try to spread the word about it, and it's
Yeah.
kind of similar to how, yeah, various sexual minorities like bisexuals or homosexuals have sort of created identities, sexual identities, and come out of the closet and all that. It helps get the word out and helps people see them as less weird.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it helps telling people that I'm more close to, because I'm able to bring that out. That's a personal part of me, that I might feel scared, uh, like in the circumstance that I'm in, and to have like bring them into that space is very helpful, like for me to feel better.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, just for most people, that just having it be a rather private thing that you share with your inner circle
Yes,
is
exactly,
like enough for people.
exactly, 100%. But yeah, I mean, I don't envision myself ever doing the gender like full transition because I feel like that's just setting off a bomb in my life, and I would not be able to, like my scholarship probably wouldn't reach as many people as I would want it to. Yeah.
Which aspects of transition are you considering?
Well, still like I'm kind of more new to this sphere. Like I said, like I kind of entered in May last year. So, what you mean by transition? Like, would you consider like cross dressing and makeup as aspects of transition?
Sure. Yeah. Just like which aspects of cross gender embodiment do you plan on doing on either like a
Okay.
temporary or long term basis?
Yeah, I mean, I would say cross-dressing, good. I love it. The fashion aspect has been like the forefront thing for me. I also love men's fashion too. And I guess I kind of went through like in childhood, I had like, oh, I'm into like men's fashion and like stuff. Even though I also loved women's fashion, I just kind of kept that a little bit hidden. Um, so fashion, like wearing women's clothes, I like all fashion aspects of makeup. And then I think like I would consider doing hormones and just like weighing the pros and cons, but I don't think I would ever go through like social full transition to everybody. I might consider like in a relationship, like with a girlfriend, like to use alternate pronouns, or if I'm in an environment where I can use alternate pronouns, like that does, I do get gender euphoria from that. So some spaces where I can do that, I'll do it. Like, and then spaces where I can't, like I'm fine not doing it. And then I think I would cut it, like I would stop, like I'll never do a surgery, like irreversible surgery. I just don't envision that being like wise for me or feasible, and I would not do the full transition. So, but I know things pile up, which is kind of scary. Uh, but I also do think in terms of reality. So I'm also kind of not scared at the same time.
Yeah. And I think an important consideration is that it sounds like you first started having these feelings more strongly around age 18. And
Yes.
so you're only 3 years into that right now. And so it can, chronologically, it could still very much be in the honeymoon period.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say?
Um,
Would you say it ends? And
well, I just sort of based it on sort of what the typical pair bonding periods are for humans. And I, um, I think I've tried to look this up before, but haven't gotten super specific answers. I know there's a book called Anatomy of Love that said that the pair bonding period was typically around 3 to 4 years. Um, and so
interesting.
that's usually the estimate I go by. Um, yeah, but I think if you notice that the feelings, like say with time, if the gender dysphoria or the gender euphoria responses feel less strong, and then um, you kind of get like habituated to it, and then the feelings start to affect you on more of a deeper identity level, then that would sort of
Okay.
be indicative that it's like transferred more into like the long-term companionate phase of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've experienced that a tiny bit already.
Yeah, it can be pretty quick. I mean, that's why there's always that joke about like what's the difference between a transvestite and a transsexual, and it's 2 years. Um, you know.
That's hilarious.
Um, yeah, are there any other subjects you want to touch on that you have in your notes? I know sometimes I found that when I interview people that are very young, they just haven't
Yeah.
had as many years of experience to draw upon.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't. I mean, I do have significant things, I think, but uh, I've also struggled a lot with like depression and anxiety my entire life. Um, and I went on uh my doctor, I guess, thought I had ADHD, or I thought I did, and I went on like Vyvanse and what's it called, Adderall, like when I was like 17 or 18, um, and I ended up not liking it. It got me through high school. I probably would not have graduated high school had I not had it. I was a terrible student, which is funny that I'm like a great student now in college because I found something I loved. But I would say like I struggled so much with the anxiety and the depression just to get through life. Um, so then I tailed off from that and went on like a different, like more natural, like like it was like silver or something. I don't know if it worked or not, but it was like some natural thing. And then my
Are you thinking of
anxiety,
colloidal silver?
I don't know. I don't know, but it was some like natural dissolved tablet. And I think it helped, but it could have been placebo a little bit. But then I tailed off, and then I didn't take any medicine for a while because I was scared of like how it made me feel. Like the Adderall was not good for.
Yeah,
Um,
did it make you a bit like irritable and aggro?
it made me like not have emotions, maybe, and it also like not as hungry. So like I wouldn't really want to eat as much. Also like a little dizzy and stuff.
Yeah.
But then I kind of stopped taking medicine for 1 or 2 years, and then the depression and anxiety ramped up like really bad to where I would be like, it was attaching itself to everything, like in school and work, and I could barely like get through. And I would stay up like late at night, like nervous about whatever thing I had. Um, so then I tried antidepressants. At the end of last summer, and they're awesome. Like now I feel great. And all that, like a lot of the anxiety, like I would have random panic attacks and stuff, kind of just went away. And now I feel great. And I wondered about me finding out that I was like AGP trans experience in last May. And then I went on antidepressants like in July, August. So that was like 3 months later. I kind of put like that after reading the Sprinkle book on pause to like make sure that I had okay mental health, and then I kind of revisited it. So then that was kind of my journey, is once I got in a proper mental state, it kind of came out more. So I was wondering, asking you, like, do you think that kind of going on antidepressants and getting like my headspace right allowed like the gender stuff to come out in ways that I suppressed it earlier? And could some of the anxiety have been rooted in like the having to fit that male typical role that I couldn't fit, and like subconsciously, because I feel like there's a good chance that it did, but I can't be sure of it.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I will say though that did you say you first started um, taking amphetamine around age 17?
Yeah.
Right. And then then the gender feelings came forth like about a year later.
Yeah, I've never thought about that before, but I did have more childhood stuff that I mentioned, but
Right.
still,
Yeah.
it didn't
No.
come out as much.
Right. Yeah. I'm just mentioning that because I know I have extensive experience with amphetamines, and I know that like in the earlier phases of them, it can really increase libido,
Okay.
and I wouldn't be surprised if that sort of increased temporarily, at least, when you were first taking them, sort of increased autogynephilic feelings.
Yeah,
But it sounds like going off of them, you still have those same kinds of feelings.
I do. So that's kind of what it's obviously not caused by it. It would just maybe make it come out more.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I feel like being in a normal headspace allows me to think more rationally about uh, myself, and thinking more rationally about myself is how I was able to kind of navigate this. I don't know, maybe.
I mean, I find that relatable. I felt a lot better about um, my gender situation once I understood where the feelings came from, because
Exactly.
it's maddening when you just don't know why you feel that way, and it's and it
100%.
and when it's so unpredictable.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but once you get how it works, basically every time the feelings happen, it pretty much makes sense every time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've just found it way easier to deal with it. Being able to understand it, it's like it doesn't hurt as bad
Yeah.
for me. Um, yeah, I feel like we've touched on a lot.
Yeah. We have. I mean,
Um,
I'm open
uh,
to more
yeah,
or not.
do you have any other things you want to talk about?
Uh, Let me think about. Let me look at my notes. Um, hmm. Oh, I guess I would say like, is this AGP stereotype is that you're like uh super into, like, you're like really obsessive with stuff, or like you're super into different hobbies and like you get really obsessed with them, or people like they do
It sounds more like an autism stereotype.
yeah, I don't know, and there's some connection apparently, or like correlation, like doesn't equal causation, but I mean it could be there. I don't know. I've always been so obsessive with anything I do, um to the point where I become obsessed with that thing, and that's how I'm so good at work.
Right, at the learning the ancient languages and such.
Yeah, like I learned Egyptian in like 3 months.
Yeah, that's yeah. I would think that generally when someone can get like hyperfixated on various hobbies like that, it does seem to be like an Asperger's trait.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, nobody, none of my doctors have ever said anything about that. But my friends will be like, "Oh, this dude has autism," and then other other people will be like, "Oh, like he doesn't have autism. He just has a high IQ. Like, don't be mean." And and I'm just like, it doesn't necessarily change. Like if I was diagnosed with autism, it doesn't really change like my situation at all. Like I'm still the same person. So I don't necessarily know how that would affect me, but I also feel like it's kind of scary to think about if I did have it. Um, I don't know, because there's such like a negative stereotype of people with autism that like I might hate myself for it or something. I don't,
Yeah, it used to be um, called Asperger's. Like that, they differentiated between the really severe cases and then the milder ones, which they called Asperger's. And I do think that Asperger's is overrepresented in the AGP population. It does seem that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never really tried to do any tests or anything. I mean, I've done like an online one that I found that was like, "Do you have autism?" And it was like, "Yes." But uh, I haven't done like an actual one. So
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know. Um, I mean, you could go to a clinician if you cared enough, but honestly, unless that information would make you change how you live your life, it's probably not really that important of
yeah,
information.
I don't think it would. I mean, I just think like the obsessiveness has been such a core aspect of who I am. I mean, like as a kid, like I mentioned, I love hockey. Like I know every single player on every single team, and like I, as a kid, I would be able to tell you every captain like of every team, and like yeah, so it's been like kind of a core part of who I am, and uh, you know, in my career, like being able to latch on to something that I loved that I could get obsessive about, and it's healthy, really kind of unlocked like my kind of career because I'm 21 and like I'm very early on, and I've already like kind of done a lot of things that other people at my age haven't done. Like so, I've got like a lot of accomplishments. I don't really want to go into specifics, but I've done a lot of like things that's kind of unheard of for people my age, and I feel like a lot of that is just from the obsessiveness.
Yeah, no, that can make you sort of accomplish things way faster. It often, I think, like you kind of got to go with it while it's happening because sometimes the fixations change with time, and then you find new things to get fixated on.
Yep, I do
So
that.
yeah, I say as long as you're channeling it into something good, like keep going at it while the feeling is there.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly things that won't ever go away. I mean, like the hockey thing, like I've been obsessed with that since I was like 8, and I'm 21 now, so that's not gone away. But other things have gone and passed, and it's kind of like I got really obsessed with. I have loved music all the time. I mean, I love music. Play guitar, played in orchestra in high school, like on my high school orchestra. Um, but I got like obsessed with headphones and stereos and uh, car subwoofers and everything like for a couple months or a year, and then I kind of like stopped. But it became like a part of who I was, where I still have that like attachment, where like I always am gonna have like the best headphones I can get, but I'm not like as into it as I was. I don't know. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, and I mean for something like that, you kind of learn enough to the point where it's like you don't need to learn anymore.
Yeah, that's
And
where I'm at. That's where I'm at. And yep.
um,
And then I just switch to a different topic, and then I do the same thing, and then I move to another thing.
yeah, it's yeah, obviously I'm not diagnosing you as autistic or whatever,
Yeah,
but that is a normal thing for people that have the high functioning, the high IQ kind of like the Asperger's, what they used to call it. Um,
interesting.
it's yeah, no, and that's specifically the like I said, the high IQ kind, because there's also the really intense autism where it is a low IQ kind.
Yeah. Do you think that that has anything at all to do with sexuality and gender?
Y- yeah, that people that have Asperger's seem to have much higher rates of atypical sexualities or paraphilias, and even just beyond just paraphilias, like just considering gender-based attraction, um, even bisexuality and homosexuality is present at elevated rates among people that are categorized as autistic. So it does seem to be related. I think it seems like there's just a higher propensity to have atypical developmental pathways happen when someone is autistic. Like, they'll be more likely to have atypical sexuality, or even just physically some of their organs, like the GI tract, might not function as well. Like, there's just a lot of things that can developmentally, like, get little quirks in them or go off the normal development path.
Interesting.
Yeah, is there anything left on your notes?
You had asked a question of what would I want like other AGPs to
Yeah.
know. I mean, I can't really speak like it was kind of a big question to like talk
Yeah,
to.
that's usually the one I close out with, so it's a good time to bring it up.
Okay, good. Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the things that this is just my experience, but like you can believe, for me, you can believe in like an AGP ideology and not fight everybody about it. Like you don't have to like fight everybody who disagrees with you on that point. I mean, like I still have like, I still try to have like relationships with people who don't agree on the ideology of it. And like Blanchard for me has been really helpful, and his typology has been really helpful. But it's also not like the end all be all for me. Like they're simply just categories to help you. They don't have to be like constricting. And I think even Blanchard himself said that there could be a third type. And like there are just things that we don't know, like that are unknown, and we can't know everything. And I feel like we don't need to be as dogmatic about it, but simply like for your stuff, like I appreciate so much how you're able to explain things for people. And I mean, I know you got into some fights that come for you, I guess, rather than you picking them. But for normal people like me, you don't really need to do it. I don't know. And then I guess I wish that more people were aware. Like, I guess you're asking other AGPs. Like, I would categorize people who are in the trans mainstream space. Like, most of them or a lot of them have AGP ideology. And, like, it's simply just a way to explain where these things are coming from. And there's nothing, like, denigrating about that. And it doesn't have to be denigrating. And I wish that more people in the trans space knew that they had AGP and that it was not something to be ashamed about, but simply just a way to like understand where it's coming from, because it will help. I think it will really help them understand their identity better, like it's helped me a lot. So I guess those are like the big things that I noted.
Yeah, those were good points. I'm gonna end recording now. Thanks for taking the time to have this discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much.